when it came right down to it, they only needed 4 or so elements to access within that core, right? Just as we, within our own environments, we have, separation of duties, we have, rotation of duties, we have all these things. When we think about the third parties that are into our network, they're another access point. They're another vector of potential attack or risk.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Cybersecurity issues are becoming more and more common as the adversaries and state-funded agencies get sophisticated in their capabilities. Most businesses will need to rethink their cybersecurity strategy. It'll be even more critical for regulated companies such as aerospace and defense and medical devices. Also, as we advance with our capabilities with Industry 4.0, OT security will be even more critical. What can executives do to educate themselves and prepare for enterprise security? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss how to plan for enterprise security. We covered many grounds in this episode, including risk factors and considerations for executives as they prepare for cybersecurity. We also discussed concepts such as the importance of threat profiles and the common entry points for ransomware. Finally, we discussed how to evaluate software and hardware from the perspective of cybersecurity. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. And today we are going to be talking about one of the sensitive topics in the manufacturing community, and that is going to be enterprise security. So we are going to start with everybody's intro. So Chris, I am going to start with you. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. Chris Garadini. I'm the CEO and founder of Turnkey Technologies. We're a 27-year Microsoft partner organization implementing ERP and CRM solutions in mid-market enterprise class companies. So a lot of perspectives on security.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for being here. Your experience is going to be super critical. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure, Sam. My name is Tom Rodden, CIO of Varian Medical Systems, and I have been doing ERP implementations, including security angles, and building a whole security team at Varian over my career and particularly the last few years. So I'm really interested in this topic and definitely have some opinions.
Okay, amazing. And Tom, I think you are part of one of the most regulated industry and the most compliance requirements any industry is going to have. So I am super excited to have you as part of this panel. Thank you so much. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Bill Polifka. I'm the co-founder of Cymonics. I'm a 15-year veteran of the IT industry. And if you talk digital transformation, I've been working on digital transformation projects for the past 15 years. So with security mind focus, Cymonics is a full cybersecurity service company. So we run a full red team, blue team. We help with compliance issues. And, we have a special place for manufacturers. Been a board member of Constep, what is our local manufacturing extension program. So a lot of experience in manufacturing as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Bill, for being here. And your manufacturing experience is going to be super critical. And any of the digital transformation cannot be done without considering the security. So your experience is going to be super, super beneficial. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Hi, my name is Paul Laporte. I am the Cybersecurity Coordinator for the Advanced Institute for Manufacturing. We are New York's one of 10 New York MEP centers. We specialize in cybersecurity. I have, since 2016, been providing cybersecurity services, including assessments, workshops, and employee training for about 300 manufacturers throughout New York State. And we tend to specialize in helping companies meet Department of Defense requirements in the DoD supply chain.
Yeah, so you are right there in the trenches, and you are actually consulting with the manufacturers and really prepping them for the security. So those stories are going to be super exciting and interesting. Thank you so much for being here, Paul. Renrich, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Okay, thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the co-founder of Arista Technologies Limited. We are focused on OT security, and I have 23 years of industry experience, mostly in the oil and gas, fertilizers, petrochemical refining industry. So I bring a lot of security and safety background into the conversation. I'm so glad to be here and speak with all of you guys. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. And your background is going to be super beneficial from the OT perspective. So thank you so much for being here, Renrich. Debbie, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Good afternoon, Debbie Momat, CEO of Twin State Technologies, also heavily involved in the manufacturing sector as well as several other critical verticals. I'm a CISSP with other information security credentials. Organization really focuses on productivity and security type of solutions to help predominantly small and medium businesses. We work closely with Paul and his team, and really appreciate being asked to participate today.
So let's start with the framework. And people who have been here for some time in many different panels, one of the things that I always like to do is, let's say if I'm the executive and if I am planning for the security for my organization, what are the factors that I should be looking at, and what are going to be the risk factor that I should be watching for? Chris, I am actually going to start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. And, I'm thinking layers and layers of different types of security. And so for my purview as, an ERP implementation is I work with the executive teams in terms of planning security. It's more focused on the application security. And so as you think about the user audience, and again, whether these are internal employees in the organization or their external constituents that need access to application and data, again, we're focused, and now we're in the core. There's certainly, these folks are going to talk about a lot of access just to even get to the application layer, but certainly planning resources and really looking at users and roles and the nature of the information they need to touch, whether they're transactional, whether they're consumers. So we really help the executives by building a workbook, a planning document to start mapping security requirements for those users within the organization. Again, even external, whether those are customers or vendors. So it starts with a planning document. And again, that's a very good resource to begin building and developing, even as you rationalize separation of duty requirements. So again, you hear me, I'm ERP centric. I'm at the application level. Certainly we'll talk about more, but that's a great starting point as you look at your user audiences and begin to understand what do they really need to do, what access do they need within the application systems themselves. So I'll start there.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting perspective. And I think a lot of folks in the room, they are going to be talking about how the application security is going to be relevant overall from the infrastructure security. And let's say if the application is not going to be as secure, or if the application is not going to support the segregation of the responsibilities, what are going to be the risk factors because of that? So next, I am actually going to move to Tom. Tom, in your industry, I think you have very strict requirement overall in terms of the segregation of duties from the application perspective. But since you have actually worked on a real medical device and you have actually sold those medical devices to other hospitals, so obviously I'm pretty sure you have got a lot of different questions from your customers regarding the security and the compliance certifications. So what are some of the risk factors that anybody should be looking at when they are looking at the security for the first time?
Well, again, there are so many angles here, Sam. If we're talking about a SaaS application versus an on-prem application, I think you can start to segregate and differentiate a bit. If it's on-prem, you're going to have a lot more responsibilities on your plate. You're going to be responsible, to Chris's point, not just for the application layer, but for the whole stack. So you're going to have to worry about your operating systems. You're going to have to be worried about patching. You're going to have to be worried about network. You're going to have to be worried about a lot of things, including data privacy that you manage. And if you're selling these solutions, again, on buy side or sell side, if it's a SaaS application, I think you can operate a little bit more at that application layer for sure. And, you might be asking the vendor, or we might be asked for certifications, as you mentioned, Sam, SOC 2s or other forms of security certifications. But one of the things I think that people have to keep in mind as well is whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, at the end of the day, your users are using devices. There are endpoints that need to be secure as well. People are storing data on the endpoints. Those endpoints are gateways into the applications and systems. And so identity security, password security, malware, potentially ransomware, encryption, all of those things are risks at the endpoint in addition to potentially on the back end. So if you've got a great SaaS provider, you may have addressed the back end, but you still own all of those endpoints. You still own the application layer. Technically, I mean, even we use Salesforce. It's not so secure that our identity management, our password management, our endpoint management doesn't matter. It matters. It matters a lot. So I would start to make the distinction between SaaS and on-prem, or cloud and on-prem. And then I think there's a commonality of responsibility when it comes to devices. So those are a couple of initial points.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that in case of SaaS, your responsibilities may not be as much, but still you are still responsible for your endpoints and all of the devices or the endpoints that you are going to have in your premises. So you definitely need to think about that. So next, I am actually going to move to Devi. And obviously, right now, we are really talking about the software, the hardware, the endpoint. But when we talk about the enterprise security or the organizational security, it's slightly bigger than that. So I'm pretty sure you are going to take slightly more organizational perspective. Let's say if I'm the executive and if I'm planning for, okay, what am I looking at here? Okay, number one, number two, number three. So how would you advise an executive with respect to number of risk factors, number two, the planning?
So that's a great perspective, right? And to many, and I work a lot with executives, the whole topic of security is pretty overwhelming because you've got the people component, you have all the different layers that the folks that just spoke about addressed very eloquently. You also have your third parties, and I think a lot of times that's overlooked. When I'm helping executives kind of digest and understand where to start, a lot of times we'll just start with assessing the environment to really get a sense. And what we find almost always is there's surprise in the leadership. They're surprised at what they didn't know about their environment that they thought was being taken care of, or that exists that they were not even aware of. One example is in a recent environment. We had a client that they had a third party that had access into their system. And when we asked, what are they accessing? They had 100% access to everything of their core. When it came right down to it, they only needed 4 or so elements to access within that core, right? Just as we, within our own environments, we have, separation of duties, we have, rotation of duties, we have all these things. When we think about the third parties that are into our network, they're another access point. They're another vector of potential attack or risk. So when we talk to the executives, we tend to try to take that 35, 50,000 foot view and just kind of get them to look at the big picture rather than the bits and bytes.
Okay, amazing. So great insights there. And overall, I think, everybody is going to find some sort of surprises, because when it comes to security, if anybody is going to have any sort of issues with their system, one thing that they do is, let's just open everything up. Let me provide you the admin access, and that's it. And you don't even know that they had access to the entire system. We have seen that in case of your financial systems as well, as these guys were mentioning that, even though an employee may be required, let's say, on a couple of modules, but then they might have access to the entire application. So great points there. Now I'm actually going to move to Bill. Bill, what are your thoughts overall with respect to evaluation? Let's say if anybody is trying to do the evaluation for the first time
Do you agree with everything that has been said so far? Do you disagree with anything?
Yeah, no, Sam. So, I think both Chris, Tom, talking about layered defense, looking at the application layers, those are all areas we highly recommend people focus in. And just like Deb said, starting with the asset inventory and really kind of knowing what your attack surface looks like. I think a lot of people don't fully comprehend inside of their company, from things like shadow IT occurring, applications slip in, people have access to things that people don't know. We see it all the time. I'd even push it a little bit higher too, Deb. I think that's one area. I like to walk in with people, and when I'm sitting down and working with our client base, we tend to ask, what are your crown jewels, right? What do you really need to protect in your business, right? What systems, if they go out, will stop you from making money, making your parts, right? What are the key things that need to happen every single day for your business to be successful? Defining those crown jewels, we really like to work backwards from that. The other area I would add to everything that the other panelists have said so far is know your adversary. Do you understand what your threat profile looks like, right? And, when I sit down with a lot of senior leaders of organizations, when you ask the question, do you understand who might be an adversary to you? I'm always surprised at how little information. There's a lot of education that can go around there. We like to, when we're talking about that layered defense, build it towards your adversary, right? Because there is only finite dollars in for companies to spend on this stuff. And, they got to get as much return on it as possible. So all the things all the other panelists said, and those little extra things we like to add on as well.
That's very interesting. And you actually mentioned some of the new terms that even I was not familiar with. So I'm actually getting educated as well here. So I'm actually going to have some clarifying questions for you. So when anybody is looking at, let's say, the threat profile, as an executive, let's say if I'm doing manufacturing, I'm building a bunch of parts, I don't even know where I have threats from. I could probably have threats from everybody just because I could be mean to a lot of different people. And you never know, right? So, okay, so what are we looking at here?
Yeah. So Sam, I think everybody has a little bit different threat profile, right? And so, if you're looking at a manufacturer, I think some of it, if you're in the supply chain of a big defense industrial based company, your threat profile is going to be a little bit different than if you're a financial bank, right? And the people that are going to go after you. But in manufacturing, a lot of times, I think the areas of concern, we're concerned about ransomware. Okay. Absolutely. We are definitely concerned about espionage and intellectual threat property. When you move into those areas, I think we're looking at more sophisticated adversaries, right? I think we're starting to look at nation states or very sophisticated criminal organizations that maybe are sponsored by nation states. And just to name a few, right? We might be looking at APT 21, APT 22, APT 44. These organizations tend to be China, Russia-backed organizations. So, I think knowing manufacturing, knowing your customer base, knowing why a person would want to go after it's an important part of the conversation when building your security program.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Bill, for that. So, Denrich, I'm actually going to move to you next. So, what do you think so far? Do you agree with everything that has been said so far? Would you like to emphasize anything? If you think that something that has been said is super critical and important, if you disagree with anything, just mention that as well.
Thank you, Sam. And I have to agree with everybody. Others, I'll be kind of knocked out. But I want to kind of summarize what everybody mentioned and put in kind of a sequential perspective. I come from the OT background, so we have a certain sequence. So I would always begin if a company is looking to have a security program, what is the business rationale? And that a little bit Bill touched, and I want to just add to it. A business rationale is based on the nature and magnitude of financial, safety, environmental, reputational, and other consequences which will occur if there is a cyber incident occurred. So this would be first whenever you are going to deploy or think about a security program, you need to think about that. And once you have this business rationale, then you have to get, most important is a buy-in from the C-suite, because this business rationale will help them change these guys' mindset from one being to security as an IT cost as opposed to security as an lever or as a business risk management tool or framework. So this is very important. Second is, again, you need to establish what is your purpose, what is your objective when you're kind of deploying your security program. It could be to identify top risk or control access to confidential information or critical system, or it could also to meet the legal or mandatory compliance, etc., etc. Then the next step would be to do a kind of a risk analysis. We can do that by using risk assessment. Once you do that, you will get different risk profiles or threat profiles. And one important piece, especially if small and medium businesses are going to some certification. For example, you're going for certification, basically I'm based out of Canada, so we have Cybersecurity Canada, then you have to create a risk registry. So what is a risk registry? Basically, a risk registry is you will define what is the different risk it is there in that particular environment. It could be, for example, you have a Wi-Fi device. That's the risk. So if that device is compromised, so what is the consequences? So that has to be defined. What is the likelihood or the frequency of threat occurring? That has to be once again identified, documented. And then also you'll have to, in that particular risk registry, define the different mitigation strategies. And then finally, you define the risk ranking. And this risk ranking is important. I will explain as I go a little bit deep. We'll also touched upon asset discovery. If you don't know what asset you have in that environment, what the hell you are protecting. So you need to know that. And definitely there is asset management, which has a very important component called obsolescence. So in an OT environment, these pieces of information are absolutely critical. And in a small and medium manufacturing unit, then you also have to talk about data identification, data classification. And data classification is important because you have to deploy countermeasures only for critical data. Non-critical data, you don't have to spend a bunch of money. So you have to be lean as well, cost lean when I say lean. Then, of course, Tom did mention about patch management, backup management. This all goes about it. But the most important piece here is also a security governance, which also encompasses your security policies and procedure. Defined. Then the company should also think about having a incident response plan. What will happen when there is an incident? Who is the touch point? Who will manage the backup? Who will do the restore? Is there external agency who will take care of the incident response management? Who will do the forensic, etc., etc. And I talked about risk ranking. Once you do all this, then you have to deploy different countermeasures based on that asset class and also based on the risk ranking also. Some criteria you'll have multiple layers of protection, and for some maybe a single or double layer of protection could suffice it. The most important piece in this is people, and as you all know, people, process, and technology, and the importance goes exactly in that order. So I will say the training of the employee, especially again going back to Bill, phishing, ransomware, these are the threats. So they need to be aware about all these new ways of getting inside the organizations. Basically social engineering. You need to train your people about social engineering, and if they know, if they are aware, then they can protect themselves and the organization. Well, just to sum it up, security should be culture driven and not technology driven, because within the fabric of culture and process, you can have a very strong security integrated. Yeah, this is just to summarize everything. If a new organization wants to deploy security program or framework into the organization, that's all from my side.
Okay, amazing insights there. And you are absolutely right that education is definitely going to be part of your security profile. You definitely need to take care of that. Thank you so much, Sandesh, for that insight. Paul, I'm pretty sure you are going to have life stories the way Debbie had. So let's say if you were working with the first-time executives, what are some of the surprises that you are seeing in your case? How does the evaluation typically go? Let's say if you were to break down that evaluation in 30, 60, 90 days, I don't know how long that is, to be honest. Okay, so maybe provide some steps how the different phases of evaluation are and what are different surprises that you are seeing when you are working with different companies.
Well, in doing this for 5 years now, there's not too many surprises that I see anymore. There tends to be kind of similar songs no matter where you go. And typically the way it goes is that the first time you walk into a facility, really the thing that the biggest commonality that a lot of manufacturers, especially small and medium ones, which is what we predominantly, if not exclusively, deal with, tends to be kind of what, to Denrich's point was made earlier, the rules aren't really written down. There's a kind of overall understanding of the people working here pretty much know what to do and what not to do. But if somebody walked through their door and said, okay, show us where that's written down, they wouldn't be able to do that. So that is really, when we're going through and doing this, that is probably the place that most of the businesses that I go into, that's the biggest thing they have in common, is we need to establish the rules, because, to Tom's point of the endpoint being the device, the endpoint is the user. It's actually the person who's handling it. And that is one of the biggest, I think, myths overall, if you're not somebody who has studied cybersecurity or who has studied enterprise security in the subject, is that this is an issue for your IT department, or it is an IT architecture related issue, when it's not, because they're not the only people who are handling the information in your organization. You need to really make sure that everybody who is handling the information you have understands how to do that responsibly and understands what they're handling. And this can come from, where we see Department of Defense things like CUI markings or anything like that, classified markings, whatever that might be. We need to have those rules written down of, okay, here's what those things look like, and here's what to do in the event that you see them. Or the rules of, how do we handle thumb drives? How do we handle information coming and going from our organization? If we are a more cloud-based environment, where are we allowing people to store that information when it's not on our cloud, if anywhere? Should we be allowing that at all? Like, those are really the kind of ground rules that you need to set initially. And then from there, once those kind of base rules are set, then you can start to fine-tune it and see, okay, what industry standards do we need to meet? What government requirements do we need to meet? Do we need to meet like PCI 800-171, HIPAA, like whatever it may be? Then you can kind of fine tune it to that. I do want to go kind of an additional layer beyond with the employee side, in addition to, again, making sure that they're well educated and making sure that they understand the information that they're handling. Again, much to Denrich's point, those policies and those training, extremely important. There is an element of that, and this is kind of the elephant in the room. It is something that people don't like to talk about, but it is things that we have seen personally when going through. We need to also make sure that employees understand what it looks like when somebody within the organization is trying to get access to information that they don't need, or that they're trying to take somewhere else. Because, to Bill's point, yes, some of these people are very sophisticated actors from nation states, but we had a specific example in our region with a business that we were working with, where an employee was hired by a competitor and they were paid a bonus to bring as much information about their original employer to the competitor that they possibly could. So they printed out like 85 pages worth of stuff, left out the door, and, took away a bunch of IP with them. So that training needs to include that element. And like I said, it's kind of an uncomfortable and unspoken thing, because we don't want to think that anybody that we're trusting with our, trusting to work at our business could do that to us. There's a lot of reasons for that. It could be blackmail, extortion, bribery, person falls on hard times. Like, those are all things you need to consider. So I would just kind of go overall, just kind of piggyback on Denrich and saying that when you're starting at the ground level, those are the things that you're going to need to be concerned about the most, is just having those rules set, having those boundaries established. What are we trying to protect? How do we handle it? Where are we saving it? If we're sending it to somebody, how do we do that? Those are probably the most important first steps for somebody who's just starting to look to get into this subject.
So some very interesting points, and I am going to have some clarifying questions for you, Paul. So when we talk about writing these rules, obviously you can write these rules, and I don't know whether they are going to be written in a book, but typically maintaining them over the period of time and complying with them is a different ballgame altogether.
Sure.
So what have you seen in your experience? And especially if we are talking about slightly larger organizations, then obviously you have a lot of different moving parts in that, and a lot of different handshakes as well. And sometimes things could actually, fall in the cracks. So in your experience, are these rules written typically in some sort of governance software? Are they utilizing just a book and then everybody sort of goes by the Bible? Or what is the practical life here when it comes to complying with the rules?
So what we always try and encourage companies, if they're building cybersecurity policies or anything like that, is to piggyback it and build off of whatever documentation standards they have currently. Like a lot of companies that we have go through like ISO certifications or things like that. So they may have a specific way that their handbook is written, or they may use some sort of governance software. We just encourage them to take the tools that they have and that they're comfortable with using and then incorporate it into that. And another thing with manufacturers is that they're a little bit more used to kind of touching base with each other more regularly. So that's why I always say, if you're writing these policies, you want to communicate this via some sort of training, not just hand you a book, hey, read through this, let us know when you're done. Like you actually want to communicate those policies to employees. So if they don't understand something or they have further questions, we can follow up on that. And for that, again, it's just working into the culture. A lot of places we go to have a morning huddle where the departments meet up for 15 minutes at the beginning of the day. Work a little bit of cybersecurity into that. Just say, hey, we want to focus on this. Like you can really modify it. And one of the things that we always encourage, and one of the things that a lot of the standards that we work with, like with the 800-171, actually encourage, is to mold this to your organization. We don't want the message not getting conveyed because you didn't do it in this form or write it down this particular way. Like if something works for you as an organization and it's worked in the past with other information you'd had to get across for productivity or for safety purposes, do the same thing. If that's working for you, keep going with it. And that's really the key to making sure that those things don't fall through the cracks, is just doing things people are used to. And then additionally, you can't just do it once and walk away. You have to continue to remind people every 6 months, every year or so. If you've updated any policies, you should be letting them know. And you should just be retraining employees on existing things, because people might have shifted departments. They may not know something that you had to communicate to them the training the first time around. Things may have changed. They just may not have used that system at all in the year. So you really want to remind people and give them refreshers periodically. This isn't just a one-time process. This is a living document, a living process that you're going to have to do and update regularly, at least once to twice a year, perhaps more if you're a bigger company, or if you have some sort of big change to your organization, like you move to a new building, you completely upgrade your systems, you go from on-premises to cloud-based. Like those are all things that could require a second look at things. And then once you've done that second look, you're going to have to communicate it out to the employees.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for those insights. Really appreciate it. So, Chris, I'm actually going to come back to you again, and we are going to differentiate between your third-party responsibility versus your own responsibility. And obviously, as Tom had pointed out overall, that if you are procuring your software or hardware, that responsibility is really going to fall under those vendors that, if I'm procuring from you, then I hope that you have your game up and you are not going to get me in trouble. And we all have seen a lot of different sales presentations, especially when we are talking about security slides. They are going to have tons and tons of logos and numbers. APT 21, I don't know what all. And as executives, we don't really understand what those mean, to be honest, and how secure they are going to be. Okay, so when I am procuring any of the software or hardware, what are the things that I am looking at so that I don't get ransomware the next day? And I don't know if all of the ransomware stories that we are hearing in the market, are they primarily because of the internal issues, or are they really because of the third party? So Chris, from your experience, when you are procuring the software or hardware, what are the things that you are looking at so that you don't get ransomware?
That's great topic, Sam. And I think, I started off with application security where you're inside of it, but in the concept where we're buying a cloud-based solution, and you're like, what is the vendor's responsibility? And your point is right. Lots of logos, and what's that mean? And I think you talked about ISO and you talked about this, and it's like, okay, as we look at a cloud-based solution, how impenetrable is that installation? I think that's a great point, because if people are dealing with on-premise, they have to build all these mechanisms to keep people from getting in. But again, you would go back to vendor obligations, and certainly in a Microsoft commercial space, they have a certain number of certifications and compliances that, right, if you're trying to appease your your customers or your business in a medical space, you need to have certain compliances to give your customers confidence that their data will be secure in your system. So the vendor, it's really interesting is who's really responsible. And in the Microsoft cloud, great, you get SOC compliance. As soon as you take that application outside of their cloud, you lose your SOC compliance because anybody can access it. So I think part of it is just what are the requirements the company really needs to, number one, mitigate risk for their business themselves so nobody can compromise the operations of the business. The other side of it is what are those compliance certifications I need to win contracts, right? To win government contracts. I know Paul knows, hey, you got to be CMMC. Oh, better yet, it's got to be in a different location because it needs to be more impenetrable because of CUI data. So I think there's a few things that are going to factor into that, but what you're going to get out of the box, as we would call it, or off the shelf from the vendor, it really depends on where the application is. And again, if it's in a commercial cloud, you're going to get a certain number of security compliances, and maybe you need more than that because of the nature of your business and the kinds of contracts that you want to win, and you end up moving up into a GCC high type of situation. So a couple of things there. And like I said, in terms of the application security, there's really no guarantees of configuration. And one comment I was going to make based on everybody's perspectives, there's a long laundry list of things that should be focused on. And I think an organization to that point needs to know which of those components need to be mitigated to protect the business, and moreover, to not compromise future opportunities, because as was said, there's only so much funds to apply to these different techniques, and there's going to be ROI on addressing certain pieces, right? Backing into the vendor. How many of those come off the shelf with the solution that we're picking? So those certainly considerations, but to know those details up front, I think is going to help you make a good buying decision as well.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. And Tom, I'm actually going to move to you next. You have seen the medical device company from the ground up, right? And you have acquired a lot of different software and hardware. And I can almost guarantee that not all software and hardware are created equal, especially from the security perspective. So when you were actually, and I don't know if you were actually invited for the call, because you were selling the oncology machines, right? And those are going to be super critical from the enterprise security, from the hospital perspective. So I'm pretty sure you were probably dragged into the sales calls. So you had to convince your customers. So what are the things that you look for under the hood when you are comparing different software and hardware applications?
Well, at the application layer, the granularity of the access controls is certainly an important factor. Different applications have very different levels of control granularity. And by that, I mean, again, I throw out an example of SAP. We're a big SAP shop at Varian, for example, but Oracle and all these applications probably have similar challenges. It's just what I know. And there are levels of detail in your security controls that you can define that really are useful and powerful. So you can define a role, and you can define access at a organizational level. You could define access at a locational level within that organization. You could define access at a transactional level within that organization and that location and that function. You could define it even below transaction to field level elements within a transaction. And so there are different levels of granularity or sophistication in access controls. That is something I think is important to look into. Again, it depends on your needs. But I know we've at Varian, for example, we've evaluated some financial packages in the last 2 years, and we found that there was an issue with one of the vendors. We'd actually selected and we'd started doing a pilot with them. They'd actually misrepresented the level of granularity when it came to geographic, locational kind of controls, where we said we need to segment what Europeans financially can see versus Americans versus Asians. We need to have complete separation in the organization, country by country, and so on. And this was a relatively young financial package. They did not have that, and we were shocked and had to stop the implementation, stop the pilot, and go back to the RFP process and look at who else we were evaluating and who was in second place, because that was a showstopper. So I think there's access controls that I think are one of the things I certainly look for. I think we've mentioned a number of times SOC or HIPAA. One of the certifications, there are different types of certifications. One of the ones that's gaining some traction, I don't know how far along it is really yet. Haven't seen it a lot, but not all certifications are equal, right? For example, something called High Trust is, I think, a higher bar. It is not just a description of what someone should comply with. It has an actual independent assessment and certification that goes with it. You don't self-certify to say, I did all these things and maybe be subject to an audit at some point, that your customer may want to audit you or engage, somebody. This is an independent auditor that performs the high trust evaluation. So if somebody came to me and said, I'm high trust certified, I mean, I'd be certainly a little more impressed with that certification. If they had that granular level of access control, that'd be something that I'd be greatly interested in. For our customers, where we're installing equipment in their sites, hardware and software, we have actually, as part of our solution within their network, a firewall that comes with the product that really separates our little installation, not little perhaps, but our installation from the rest of the network. And so it is very, very protected from our customers' failings and shortcomings at times in terms of their own network management and access management. So our device and our software perhaps is a little better protected. And if, because we do remote servicing, for example, this is a whole nother topic we could get into, but when we remote into a device on the customer's premises, and we access the software in order to do a patch, an upgrade, to troubleshoot an issue. Obviously, that's a big issue, and they want that firewall around our device as well and our software to prevent anything that we might introduce into the environment from getting out more widely into their network. So some of these aspects are things that either our customers look for from us or we are looking for from some of our vendors.
Okay, amazing. Great insights there. Thank you so much, Tom, for that. Deb, I'm actually going to move to you now. From your experience, what are some of the common entries for ransomware? Where are the companies really getting them? And I don't know if you are really invited to, let's say, certify these software and hardware when these companies are procuring, because there has to be somebody who's going to be security expert who needs to certify, no. Okay, this is all good. I mean, whatever they are claiming, it actually has all of that. So when it comes to procuring these third-party software, are they typically responsible for ransomware, or it is going to be your environment?
So, at the end of the day, the organization that's implementing these applications or whatever is the one that's going to be responsible, right? So it's up to the organization, whatever organization is, to really vet the systems, the hardware, the software, the third-party connections, the systems in place that are there as a layered security, layered defense, to reduce the potential of ransomware even taking hold. But the end responsibility, the one throat to choke, if you will, is the company that's implementing these systems.
Yeah, interesting insight. Thank you so much, Debbie, for that. And now I'm actually going to move to Bill. Bill, so what are your thoughts overall? I mean, as an executive, I don't really know how to evaluate these things. And obviously, you are going to put all of these responsibilities on my head. And I don't even understand those, the security slides, whatever these vendors are talking about. So let's say if I hire you, okay, tell me, Bill, if the software or hardware I am procuring at this point of time, are they secure enough, or are they going to get me ransomware in my environment? And maybe you can touch on what are some of the common entries that you have seen from the ransomware perspective. That would be amazing.
Sure, Sam. I think for many organizations, it's not a matter of are they going to be breached, it's when, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think you're seeing NIST and CMMC and a lot of these frameworks focus on, incident response and recovery, but at the end of the day, if you're an executive and what we're trying to get you to understand is just some basic questions, right? does your company adhere to good IT best practices, right? We like to start there. If you're not doing good software deployment, patch management, if you're not putting in layers of defense, if you're not educating your workforce and helping them understand why you need a culture of security, these things, becoming a secure company is going to be more difficult. We also like to help business owners and leadership really understand, can you protect your organization? What does it mean to protect your organization, right? And again, I think all of the panelists, we've talked all about different ways, from the application side, from the network side. We haven't really talked much about transmission layers, but I mean, transmission layers are another area, and you'll see that especially as you bridge from IT to IoT to OT environments. They all have different ways of communicating. And so, are you choking out those points? Is your organization ready to take on an adversary? And to be clear, I think Paul touched on this. An adversary is not just an outside threat; it's the inside threat too. Yeah. And I'd also layer it in. It's also your supply chain, right? And a threat does not have to be somebody that's trying to intentionally cause harm. Your supply chain, there's accidents happening inside your supply chain right now that could have major effects. And we're hearing this in the news right now. And the other thing is can your organization, do you know when you're been breached, right? Like many organizations don't. And one area that we haven't talked much about is how do you monitor this? We like to say the truth is in the traffic. A lot of what we talked about today is really about building good foundations, improving the foundations. But when you finally get those elements in place, how do you optimize? Well, it's really going to come into monitoring. Are you looking at your file management systems and taking the log data? Are you looking at your network data to see if there's adversarial activity? Are you monitoring your emails, right? Because the email is a big attack vector. And then, the recovery piece is a big piece. So these are the type of questions that we help organizations think through, the leaderships. And then when you put it into a business context, it really clicks for management, right? When you can tie it back to how their business is running with people, right? And the effect it has on the people to do the work, when it has an effect to the price of what's happening inside your business, it has a lot of meaning. And when you talk about parts and the effect it has on parts, you definitely start to hit nerves, especially in the manufacturing.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Bill, for those insights. Really appreciate you. Okay, Denve, what are your thoughts overall in procuring the software, hardware? What are the things that manufacturing executives should be looking at so that they don't get ransomware?
Yeah, we had a lot of great insights. I will specifically speak about product certification, because from the environment where we also look when we are deploying stuff, the product certification also. So there's a international certification body called Common Criteria, which has two flavors. One is the EAL, which is more predominantly used in Germany, France, in those European countries. And there is something called as the CPP, which is your collaborative protective profile, which is used in Canada, US, UK, etc. So, for example, some of your perimeter devices like data diode or firewalls or certain switches, they do have EAL level, and these levels can go from level 1 to 7. 7 is the highest level. But level 4 is something which is recommended, and if the process or the asset is more critical, then you can go for a higher layer of certification. So more test is done by an independent auditor at a product level. So that is one piece. And this also holds good. For example, Mac OS is classified as EL4. And there are some other software as well. I don't want to name all of them. So yes, when you are going in for evaluation, you can also ask these questions to some of your product or software vendors as well, to make sure that you're having certain level of security assurance, not at a product level or at the software level. Of course, you have to have other layers of protection as well, but this product is certified to certain standards. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Dennis, for that. And Paul, I don't know if you're going to have any stories where you are really asked to evaluate the software or hardware for your clients just because they didn't understand what they were getting into. So can you touch on, what are the things that you would be looking at? Let's say if you are procuring a software or hardware, and also touch on what are some of the common entry points for the ransomware.
So for us and what we do at AIM, generally we're not doing a lot of implementation and setting it up, but we will get a lot of questions of, should we go with X or should we go with Y? And the things I generally recommend to ask when you're looking for something like that is, number one, starting off, just find out what industry standards you need to meet currently, and then somewhere in that that hardware or that device's marketing page, there should be a page that just screams that alphabet soup out at you, like, we are all of these things. They want you to know this information because it's a selling point for them. So that's the starting point. Once you get there and you've actually made a decision on it, you want to make sure that it is configured properly, because we're talking about the most common entry points for ransomware, and that's usually going to be not necessarily because of some bug that appeared in a particular piece of ransomware or an exploit, although that does certainly happen. Another thing to ask is how frequently these things are being patched and updated, and how much maintenance is being done on them, and what the interval looks like for that. But it's because we set it up so, was mentioned earlier, I think in the previous discussion, everybody has local administrator privileges. So somebody just opened up an email with some ransomware, and bang, now it's installed on their computer, it gets to the network, bad times for everybody. We want to make sure that what we call we make the target on our backs as small as we possibly can, because, like it's been mentioned, not a matter of if, but a matter of when. We want to ensure that when somebody sets their sights on us and takes that shot, the target is as small as possible, so they have the most likely chance of missing. So maybe they hit an employee who can't open the software, can't install it because they don't have administrative rights. So then that circumvents that. It's really making sure that we have that target minimized. And then additionally, I think one other thing I'd like to mention is, just because I've been kind of seeing it more recently, is that one of the things that we run into with a lot of organizations, especially smaller ones, is we run into an environment where they're running a lot of out-of-date operating systems past end of life now. Windows 7 is the main one. The biggest reason that they end up doing that, if I go through and say, hey, this is end of life, you need to upgrade, well, our ERP system can't run on Windows 10. Oh, okay. So you need to, when you're deciding to purchase that software or what have you, especially for something that's going to be holding and managing your data, you need to consider what the lifespan of that is going to be. And if you know that when you purchase something, this tends to be more for on-premises things. If it's cloud-based, it's going to be its own architecture. It's going to have a lot longer lifespan. Also going to be more expensive, so that's something to consider there. But just because something is cheaper because it's an on-premise ERP solution that hooks up to your server, well, if it only lasts for a couple server versions, and now 10 years down the road you have to either spend $50,000 to upgrade it, or you need to now run insecure software because you can't afford to, you need to start planning for that now. And you need to say, okay, well, if we're going to go for the cheaper solution now, we need to start budgeting and saving for when we're going to replace it. Or if we're going to go with something else, it's going to be more expensive, but we're going to be able to have it serviced and work indefinitely. Doesn't matter if we're on Windows 10, 11, or 35, then that is something that you want to consider as well. So those are just all of the things. Obviously, there's a lot of others, but when you're looking at things to put into place, what industry standards are they meeting in terms of what you need to meet as an organization, what their services look like, what their support looks like for that, how to configure it to make sure that your employees can navigate it safely and reduce the target on their back. And then if there's an end of life to that, what is that going to look like, and start planning for it today.
So amazing insights there. And I am actually going to bring some things from my personal experience. And you are mentioning that, if you want to comply with any specific industry, then look for the marketing material. And I'll tell you how marketing material works, because I actually live in that world. Okay, so a lot of software vendors, they create the marketing material when the product does not even exist. Okay, so marketing material does not mean anything, to be honest. And this is the point that Tom was mentioning, that when he was actually doing the POC, then he realized that, the software did not really have that countrywide restriction capability that he was looking for. And you can only find that when you are actually going to look into the software and really pay attention to what is happening with your scenario. So again, I really don't believe that anybody should be trusting the marketing material because they are highly inflated.
So Sam, that's a real excellent point, and that's a really good vantage point. I would say that to amend my recommendation, use that as a starting point, and then do your additional research from there. Do some additional. Again, another thing that I forgot to mention was you want to. One thing that you can gauge in terms of how supportive they're going to be is how good the line of communication is when you ask questions to them. Because again, that's the thing that you want to remember, whether it's if you're working with a third-party contractor or you're looking for a service to purchase, is that you're their boss, is that you are the one who is calling the shots. And you need to make sure that you're comfortable with them and the line of communication they have. If you're reaching out to them with questions and they don't provide you the answers you're looking for, or they kind of dance around the subject, go somewhere else. Don't go with them. But that's something that you have to realize that there is. Because I think, especially with cybersecurity, there is a tendency, especially at the executive level, to just get lost and just assume that everybody else knows more than you. And yes, they're expert in this particular area, but they should be able to answer the questions in a way that you can understand. And if they can't answer those to the way that you're satisfied with, then you should be looking elsewhere. But that's an excellent point, Sam. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. So now we are going to take quick closing advice from everybody. Chris, one sentence closing advice, please.
I'd say hire a professional to do a thorough security assessment. Don't try to do it yourself, and I think at least it will give you a roadmap to begin executing on. So,
I agree. Thank you so much for that. Tom, what is your closing advice?
You can't mature in the security space overnight. You must go through a process or a maturity process that begins, I think Debbie maybe talked about this, but begins with identification. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. This is the NIST framework and maturity model. And it isn't necessarily purely sequential, but that is what you need to do, generally speaking. You can't get from identify to recover in the whole 5 stages overnight. You need to take it in pieces.
I agree. It's definitely going to be a journey. You cannot fix these things overnight. Thank you so much, Tom, for that. Debbie, what's your closing advice?
So for the executive, my closing advice is to stop delegating everything to somebody else. See me ask about stories. One that I recall 3 years ago, I did a chamber presentation for CEOs and C-level leadership. There was one CEO that came out of 50. The other population was split between interns and assistants. So that ship hopefully has sailed where leaders now know that they need to be better understanding what's going on. When you ask, for example, one of the panelists talked about the crown jewels. If you ask the IT person who's an employee what the crown jewels of are the organization, or myself in a leadership position, they may pick the payroll system. I'm going to pick the ERP because my clients depend on it, right? So the leaders, the executives really need to help to identify that, because nobody can afford to do everything. You have to pick what you need to secure and how you're going to secure it, make it part of the culture, and it starts from the leadership down to be better equipped, better understood. And to the other comment that someone just made about hire professional, successful cybersecurity is a team sport. The client, the third parties, the professionals, the IT team. So leverage everybody that you can. Distrust first. Have them prove it.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much for that advice, Debbie. Bill, I'm actually going to move to you. Quick closing advice in one sentence, please.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to put any time and energy into this, focus on your asset discovery and keep things up to patch, especially if you got to do this yourself. Those are going to be high return items, and change your passwords, use password managers. Gosh, we haven't even mentioned anything about passwords. No cost to low cost solution can really increase the cost to adversaries a lot. Use an MFA, get a one-touch pad, use a YubiKey. I don't care what it is. Get out there, change your passwords, use unique passwords. There you go.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for that insight, Bill. Really appreciate it. Danish, one sentence closing advice, please.
You should have the buy-in from the C-suite for sure. And you should implement security not as a technology stack, but it should be implemented as a culture inside of an organization. Then you can be truly safe.
Yes, completely agree. Thank you so much. Paul, your closing advice, one sentence, please.
Cybersecurity is not binary. You're not cyber secure or you're not. Find something at your organization that you can improve for no money and little time and make that change today and go from there.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for that advice. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining today's show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Paul Laporte, head over to mvcc.edu. If you want to learn more about Bill Polifka, head over to cymonix.com. It's cymonix.com. If you want to learn more about Devi Mamat, head over to twinstate.com. It's twinstate.com. If you want to learn more about Tom Rodden, head over to varian.com. It's varian.com. If you want to learn more about Drenrich Sanenda, head over to aristatechnologies.ca. It's aristatechnologies.ca. If you want to learn more about Chris Gerardini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's turnkeytech.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Drenrich Sanenda, who discusses how operational security is vital to ensure that your plant is always available and operational without any danger to the lives inside the plant. Also, the interview with Michael Swagenhofer, who discusses how insurance companies evaluate manufacturers' risk profiles. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.